Hey everyone, today I'm going to give you an example how you can build an application layout just like this using Flexbox CSS.
Alright, so to start our project, I've got two files here right now. I've got an index.html, which is going to be the HTML for our web page, and styles.css, which is going to contain all of our CSS to create our Flexbox layout. I'm using the live server plugin in order to render my web page and refresh it live. If I show you the actual web page, you can see we're up and running here. So let's go ahead and get started by building out this layout. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the let's running, and we're going to add a div tag here, and I'm going to give this an ID of app, which is going to be the main div where all the content we're working with is going to be. So what we're going to do throughout this video is we're going to add little text inside of here so we can see what the elements look like once they're rendered on the page. So I'm just going to put app here, save this, and flip back. You see we have app on our screen, so that's there properly. Let's get rid of app, and we want to create that layout where we have the nav bar on top and we have a second nav bar on the left hand side. But realistically, if you think about it, it's two panes to start off with. It's the nav bar and that's everything else underneath. So let's go ahead and create another div here, and we're going to actually start using classes at this point. We'll say upper nav, and then we're also going to create another div below it, and we'll say main wrapper because this is going to be the wrapper around our main content. Okay, and just to demonstrate this on the page, just to see what the layout looks like right now, because we're going to step through this slowly, let's paste in the names of those classes there and head over here. You can see we have these two things stacked on top of each other, which is a step in the right direction. So to make these things position correctly, we're going to start adding our first Flexbox here. So inside of our CSS file, let's create a rule for the app div tag, and we're going to say display flex, which turns it into a Flexbox. Save this, and then just to see what it looks like on the page, let's add a background color for this. And I usually select light just so it's not so jarring on the eyes. Let's start with light blue. Save that. And you can see something interesting happen. These are no longer stacked on top of each other. The upper nav and the main wrapper are right next to each other. That's because the default layout for a Flexbox is a row, which is why these were placed next to each other. So to fix this, we're going to have to add flex direction into our CSS, and we're going to set this to column, which is going to stack them back on top of each other the way we want them to be. Save that. You can see we come back in here, we're stacked on top of each other now. So let's start adding some more classes for our upper nav and main wrapper. And we're going to also set some background colors on these just so we can see what the elements look like on the page. Let's do this one light coral, and let's set this one main wrapper. And we'll use light goldenrod yellow for this one. Sounds like a fun color. Save that, and we can see our blue's no longer there, but that's because our elements are overlapping it. So that's perfectly fine. One of the interesting things you'll know is there is a border around the actual app tag, and that's because by default there is a slight margin on the body. So we're going to get rid of that inside of the body tag by setting margin 0px to get rid of that margin. And now you can see our elements go all the way to the corners of the screen, which is exactly what we want. Now, the upper nav is going to stay pretty much on top, although we're going to change the height of it. But the main wrapper, we want this thing to extend all the way down. So there is a rule inside of a CSS property called flex, where you can kind of control how big these elements are and how they scale automatically. It works off of percentages, I guess, or ratios. So if I do flex 1 inside of here, actually, if I do flex 1 inside of both of these, they're going to take up exactly the same amount of space. We also need to set the height of our app to 100 VH, which is going to take up the whole page. And there we go. We can see we have these things split down the middle with the upper nav on top and the main wrapper on the bottom. It's not exactly what we want, but it's a step closer in the right direction. We only want the main wrapper to take up all the remainder of the height. So if we get rid of flex, because this does not actually have a flex, it's just going to inherit what the size of the element is. We can save this, and you can see main wrapper takes up the whole bottom, whereas upper nav is only taking up the top. So let's give upper nav a little bit of a better height. We're going to set this to 50 pixels. Save this, and that's probably a good amount of space for our upper nav. So now that we have the upper nav set, let's split up this main wrapper so we get that minor nav bar on the left-hand side. So inside of the main wrapper, we're going to get rid of that text, and we're going to add two more elements inside of here. We're actually going to turn main wrapper into a Flexbox itself. So let's add a class to our first div of left nav, and then we're going to add another div underneath it, and we're going to give this thing a class of main, because this is where our main content for our app is going to be. Let's, same thing, add the names of these classes inside of here, just so this way we can see what they look like on the page. And you can see, just like when we started before, they're stacked on top of each other. So main wrapper, let's go ahead and turn this guy into a flexbox as well. So display :flex. And then let's start adding some CSS for our left nav and main. So I'll do .left nav. We're going to actually set a width here of 250 pixels. Start off with that, see what this thing looks like. And then just like we did before, we're going to add some more CSS for our main, and we're going to set flex is equal to 1. Now, since by default Flexbox behaves in a row, this is going to automatically split these guys up. You can see the color is not changed because we haven't set any background colors, but main starts right at about here, which is pretty close to what we're actually going for. So actually on the left nav, let's go ahead and add some background color to that just so we can see it split apart. Let's add a background color of, let's say, let's do light green just to start off with for now. And there you can see we have the upper nav, the left nav, and the main. So our layout is actually coming along quite nicely, pretty fast. So now, if we want, we'll go back to the upper nav. We're going to split this up. Most apps like this, they have kind of a title on the left-hand side and then some kind of button for a profile on the right-hand side. I mean, you could use your imagination here, but let's simulate that. So let's get rid of upper nav. We're going to actually turn upper nav into a flexbox as well. Add some div tags. We'll add our first one will be title. And then our last one will be, say, profile button. All right, go ahead and save these guys. Well, same thing. We're going to add our text in here so we can see what these elements look like. And you can see they're stacked on top of each other. We haven't turned this into a flexbox yet. So upper nav, we're going to set display equals flex. Save it. You can see we're side by side. Now, we can use a couple of different rules to help us to orient our elements a little bit better. We actually want the profile button to be slammed all the way to the right-hand side with the title on the left-hand side. So the way we can do this, we actually don't need to modify the title and profile button elements themselves, but we're still going to work within the upper nav. If I set align items to center and save, you'll see this, they have been vertically centered across. So you can use that inside of a flexbox to center pretty much anything. So align items will actually do it in the opposite orientation of your flexbox. So because we're using a row-based flexbox, align items will work by centering our items vertically. And then the way to control the spacing between the elements is actually going to be justify content. If we put center on this, one of the interesting things you'll see is this is centered across the entire thing. It's centered both vertically and horizontally, which is not exactly what we're looking for. But we can use the rule space between, which is actually going to add an even amount of space between our two elements, basically giving us that padding that we need in between. So if I save that, you can see our titles on the left-hand side, our profile buttons on the right-hand side. And just to push these guys off from the edge of the screen a little bit, let's head back into our upper nav here, and we're going to add a padding. And we're going to give it 0 pixels for the top, but we're going to give it about 10 pixels from side to side. Save that, and we can see now we have that correct amount of padding on the outside to make this look a little nicer. So now let's finish up this upper nav. What we want to do is we're actually going to set this to dark blue. I think is probably a good color, just to kind of pull it away from the rest of it. We're actually going to turn this down a little bit more, make it really dark, like that. And then we're also going to change the color to white, which is going to set the text color to white. Save that and see what that looks like. And then let's also swap this guy out. We're going to add an H1 tag in here. And we're going to say Flexbox app. It's probably a good name for our app here, right? Save that. And it's a little bit big, so let's go ahead in here and do upper nav, H1, and let's bring this font size down to, say, 20 pixels. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, it's a little bit better. I like that. So I went ahead and added this profile picture into here, which is just a picture, just a generic picture of a person. Inside a profile button, let's get rid of the text there, add an image tag here, and we'll set the source equals to .profile.png. And you can see the image is not really oriented in there properly, basically because it's too big. But let's go ahead and set the maximum width inside of here, which should correct it. So if I use .profile button, and then we'll put an IMG after that to target the image, we'll set a max width of, let's start with about 30 pixels and see how that looks. So there you go. That looks a little bit nicer. It fits in better. Okay, so now let's get onto our left-hand nav here. The first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to add some padding around the inside of the entire thing. So we'll do 10 pixels just to kind of pull the text off from the outside. And then an easy way that you can do this is we're going to add a unordered list element in here, li item 1, and then let's just create some like 2 and 3 is going to be our menu items. So we've got our list items here, and this is going to get a little more into not so much flex thing, but we're just going to clean up the CSS and make it look a little bit nicer. So inside of our left nav, we'll do .left nav. And let's say our list items, we'll set list decoration, list style is none. Just should get rid of those bullet points, okay? And then we're also going to add, let's add some padding around these elements, on the top and bottom specifically. So we're going to do 5 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 pixels on the left and right. Okay, so that adds a little spacing there. Let's go ahead and do some fun hover stuff. So left nav, li hover, using that pseudo element, and then let's say background color. And let's take our light green here. We'll stay with the light green actually, but we're going to modify this just ever so slightly to make it darker. So if I hover over my little extension here and just bring the darkness down a little bit just to make it pop. Now if I save that, if I hover over these things, you can see they light up a little bit. Let's add a little bit of border around it. So border radius, I'm sorry, let's add some border radius around it. We'll give it like 3 pixels, just a very, very subtle curve on the outside there, makes it look a little bit nicer. And then unordered lists come with some extra padding on that left-hand side, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. Left nav, unordered lists, we'll say padding, 0 pixels important, 0 pixels. Save that. Okay, that cleans that up a little bit. And let's add just a little bit of padding to the left-hand side of our items themselves so they're pushed away from the outside. We're actually going to modify this padding here. Instead of 5 pixels on the left and right, we're going to actually just get rid of that and do 5 pixels all around. So now if I hover over this, you can see we're pushed in a little bit from the left-hand side. And then you can imagine these would be kind of the links that would navigate the different content that would possibly be inside of main. So now the last thing we're really going to do to kind of drive this home is we're going to add a bunch of content into the center pane here, and we're going to make this scrollable. So when you decide to, so if there is a lot of content here, we don't really want the whole body to scroll. We just want this little section here to scroll. So let's go ahead and create some, add some extra CSS into main here. We're going to say overflow Y, which means how do we handle when the content goes beyond what it's supposed to be. And we're going to say scroll here. We also need to set a max height of this element. What we're going to do is we're actually going to use the calculation function of CSS. So we'll set the max height to, let's see, calc 100 VH, which takes 100% of the vertical height, and we're going to subtract the 50 pixels, I believe we set for the upper nav. And let's add our semicolon in the right spot, save that. So we don't notice any real difference, but on the right-hand side, you can see we have a scroll bar that caps out right at the top there. So I went ahead and added some lorem ipsum here, and you can see the scroll bar actually doesn't take up the entire page. It only takes up our inner element here. We could scroll up and down just here, and our entire navigation on the top and the left-hand side stays exactly the same. Let's just add some padding to the left and right side so it kind of comes off the side of the screen a little bit. So we'll do padding, and we'll do 0 pixels on top and bottom, and 10 pixels on the left and right. Save that. And we can see we've got a little bit of margin on the left and right-hand side here too, which makes our app just look a little bit nicer. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like and share it out to your friends. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my channel for new videos every week. If you're looking for help on an issue or just want to collaborate with other developers, be sure to join my Discord by clicking the fullstack.chat link in the description below, or just enter it into your browser to join. Thank you so much and have a great day.